Welcome to The Beat. I'm Jason Johnson in for Ari Melber. We have a lot to get to tonight, including news on the Trump Organization criminal probe. I'll talk to a former Manhattan DA prosecutor who says Trump Organization CFO Alan Weisselberg is playing, quote, Russian roulette. But we begin with surging new pressure from progressives demanding an aggressive counterattack as the GOP blocks voting rights and a riot and treason commission while slowing down the Joe Biden jobs plan. Today, less than 24 hours after Senate Republicans blocked voting rights reform, activists marching from the Supreme Court to the office of Democratic Senator Joe Manchin. Multiple arrests, including the Reverends Jesse Jackson and William Barber. Protesters telling Manchin, who keeps calling for bipartisanship, to get tougher in the fight against McConnell.
What I'm not seeing from Manchin is that higher sense of purpose to put the needs of his constituents before the needs of other interests.
From what I've seen, the bipartisanship is not working. There is no bipartisanship. There's obstructionism. And you have to get rid of the filibuster to be able to get the policies that we need passed.
Manchin has said he's not going to do that.
Right, and that's why we're here.
This is rapidly narrowing into a stark, unavoidable choice for the Democrats. As the Post puts it, they're, quote, almost out of options on voting rights and other agenda items, unless they bust through McConnell's obstruction by overhauling the Senate's filibuster rules. McConnell already said publicly he is 100% focused on stopping Joe Biden, and his actions speak even louder. Today, another White House meeting with a bipartisan group of senators amid reports of stalled talks. Biden today moving to curb gun violence, the only way apparently he can right now through executive action, which don't require any GOP votes.
Today, the department is announcing, as it just did, a major crackdown on stem the flow of guns used to commit violent crimes. We have an opportunity to come together now as Democrats and Republicans, as fellow Americans, to fulfill the first responsibility of government on our democracy, to keep each other safe. This shouldn't be a red or blue issue. It's an American issue. We're not changing the Constitution. We're enforcing it.
Tonight, progressives calling on Biden to go faster, to go bigger, to go harder, and to do it alone without Republicans if need be. Joining me now is Vice President Communications and Strategy at the Center for American Progress, Daniela Gibbs-Leger, former chairman of the Democratic National Committee, Howard Dean, and national affairs correspondent for The Nation, Joan Walsh. Thank you all so much for joining me this evening. Joan's new article is on the Democratic strategy on voting rights. Joan, I'm going to start with you, but we're not going to talk about voting rights. We're going to talk a little bit about the Republicans in Congress. I've got to play you this clip of Matt Gaetz getting owned, as the kids would say, by Secretary Lloyd Austin when it comes to issues of critical race theory. I want your thoughts on the other side of this clip. Okay, we're still working on the clip, so we're going to come to that. Joan, I'll start with this then. Look, right now, it doesn't appear that the Democrats have that many chances to get this right? They've got 6 months to the end of the year to figure out something with voting rights. What have you just written? What is your suggestion for the best strategy going forward for a Democratic Party that seems to be fighting themselves as much as they're actually fighting the opposition?
Well, Jason, I'm really glad to see progressives digging in, and I'm really moved to see Reverend Barber and Reverend Jackson out there getting arrested. I would have liked to see more Democratic lawmakers, to be honest. It's too much to ask to have Republican lawmakers. But I regretfully concluded in this article that the Democrats don't really have many options. They cannot do filibuster reform with 48 votes. And that's what they have right now. They don't have 50 votes. With 50, they could add Vice President Harris. They could get it done without getting Manchin and Kristen Sinema to go along with it. It's a really tough lift. So what I saw yesterday, and I watched all day, I watched on C-SPAN, was Democrats doing a kind of performative strategy. Okay, Joe Manchin, are you going to see that we will not get 50 votes, even to open debate? They got him a little bit of the way. They got him to actually vote to proceed on debate on a bill he's already said he opposes. So that was a teeny tiny victory. But that's really all we got yesterday. Manchin walked out of the hearing the vote where we saw what Republicans were doing and said he's still for the filibuster. It protects democracy. I don't think so. But I don't know that Joe Manchin has some kind of, people are like, I'm sorry, excuse me, Joe Biden, he should be whipping them. How's he going to whip them? What can he hold over Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema's head? I'm just not sure. I feel like it's a little bit, there's too many demands on Biden, as though he could simply snap a finger and get them into line, and he's just not doing that.
Yeah, there's a presumption sometimes that Joe Biden can wave a magic wand, wave the magic stick, and suddenly everything is going to be okay. He does not have that power. He does not have that kind of majority. Daniela, we're going to switch. I've switched the cups around a bit. I'm going to take the clip that I was going to share with Joan. I'm going to share it with you. I want to get you. Oh, okay. We don't have the clip. We'll move ahead. So, Daniela, this is amazing. Daniela, I got to ask you, this is the other part that sort of confuses me about this current fight that the Democrats seem to be having. What is it about current protests that we're seeing that's actually going to end up making a difference? Look, I can understand if you're dealing with a mayor. You can go to the mayor's office, you can complain to him or her and say, hey, look, I want you gone. I want you to do something about street lamps and everything else like that. But these protests that are happening right now, is that really going to move Joe Manchin, a guy who I've made it very clear I don't think is going to get reelected? He doesn't really have to worry about money. And Kyrsten Sinema, whenever she's putting together those word salad op-eds, she doesn't seem like she's going to move either. What do you think is the value of any of these protest marches?
I understand the point that you're making, but I think it is valuable to show that there are people who are very passionate about this issue and that the American people support this bill. They support voting rights. They support something getting done. And just because right now Joe Manchin believes that he can somehow pull some Republicans to support something, and meanwhile we have Republicans actually showing us who they really are, the majority of the American people want this done. So I think it is important for people to go and protest and make their voice heard. And yes, yesterday was a little performative, but I am putting on my optimist hat today, and I'm going to say that this is just the first step. It's going to be a painful process, but this had to be done in order to start showing Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, that like eventually, if you can't show us where you're going to get those Republican votes from, we're going to have to pursue other options. The Democrats have a limited amount of time to get things done. I hope they all understand and realize that.
Of all the sorting hats at Hogwarts, the optimist hat's one I've never worn, so I'm glad that you had that on for us today. Governor Dean, so I do have a clip for you. This is a clip of Mitch McConnell talking about what he is and is not about to do. Want your thoughts on the other side?
100% of my focus is on stopping this new administration.
I want to make Joe Biden a one-half-term president. And I want to do that by making sure they no longer have House, Senate, White House.
So, Governor Dean, look, you have experience with this, having head the Democratic Party, being a governor. When you have an opposition party that's whole policy position is basically, we will do nothing, how do you use this to your advantage? Because clearly this isn't moving Joe Manchin. Clearly it's not moving Kyrsten Sinema. Is this just something that you've got to make the case to the public in Kentucky? Like, how did Democrats work with this when Mitch McConnell's like, I'm not moving?
It's going to work in other ways. Look, the Republican Party's loyalty is to themselves, not to the country. And that's what's so discouraging about this. McConnell has always said, he said the same thing about President Obama. President Obama was handily reelected. I disagree with you. I think Manchin will be reelected. Manchin is in the most Republican state in the country right now, and I think his people like that. I think Sinema will lose in a primary and will be not heard from again if this continues. And sooner or later, that's going to dawn on her. Maybe she just doesn't like being in the Senate. I don't know. But this is really a major problem. I think, as usual, the Democrats have gone into a fight with the Republicans using AK-47s, and we have a Swiss Army knife, to quote a renegade judge. And this is not going to work for the country. We've got to get a lot tougher. The Democrats have never been tough enough with the Republicans. And I think Biden's actually playing this quite well because the Americans, the reason Raphael Warnock is in the Senate and John Ossoff is in the Senate is because the Georgia voters decided this was disgusting on the part of the Republicans. So I think we're going to pick up 3 or 4 seats in the Senate in the by-elections: Ohio, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. These are all seats we can pick up and we should pick up. And then the question is what happens in the House. And I'm not familiar enough with where the races are there. It'll be tight. I think the American people are disgusted with the Republicans, and the polls show it.
I don't quite share your optimism, Governor Dean. But look, realistically speaking, and I got to follow up on this, the concern that a lot of people have is that, yes, there are winnable seats that the Democrats have right now. As you mentioned, Ohio, Pennsylvania, all these different kinds of places. But if voting reform isn't passed, if some variation of the John Lewis Act or the For the People Act isn't passed, the chances of actually being able to win those races is diminished. So are you saying you still think the Democrats can pick up seats in the Senate next year, even if they can't get any voting reform done because of Manchin?
I do think so, because the swing voters in the suburbs don't like this kind of stuff. These are people who might often have voted Republican, but this Republican Party is essentially treacherous. They do not value the United States of America as it is now. They want to run an autocracy. And I don't think the Republic believes that's a good idea. You know who else doesn't believe that's a good idea? And this was a critical group in the civil rights movement, is the business community. Corporations despise this because instability and dictatorship is not a good formula for making money in a capitalist society. So I do expect the business people to come down hard on this. I also expect a fair amount of legal repercussions. Georgia has essentially reinstituted Jim Crow.
Right.
Now, that's shocking because Georgia is probably one of the most advanced states in the South. I think Kemp is in great danger of losing re-election because people do not want this kind of stuff. They're tired of extremism on the Republican side. The Republicans stand for nothing except for stopping Joe Biden from being president. Well, that really worked well for them against Obama. Let's see how it works against Biden and the Democrats in the by-elections.
With that in mind, Joe, we're going to go back to that original clip. This is what the Republican Party, we found it. We dug through all the archives, Dewey Decimal and everything. We're going to play the original clip and get your thoughts on the other side.
Ready.
I don't know what the issue of critical race theory is and what the relevance here with the department. We do not teach critical race theory. We don't embrace critical race theory, and I think that's a spurious conversation. I trust my leadership from top to bottom that they will give me fair and balanced and unvarnished input. And for you to say that people are telling me what I want to hear, I get it, but I'm smart enough to know
that does happen.
Yeah, you know, maybe they're telling you what you want to hear.
So Secretary Austin pretty much laid the smackdown on Matt Gaetz about this idea that critical race theory has infected our armed forces. Joan, I'll start with you because this is what I think is very clear. The Republican Party stands for stopping Joe Biden and screaming about issues like critical race theory and cancel culture. Remember when they cared about that a month ago, in order to sort of round up their base and get people active and involved. One, how effective do you think this is as a campaign strategy? And two, do you really think that the Republicans can make any headway going after the military on this?
Well, they didn't today. I mean, we saw Lloyd Austin and we saw Mark Milley also, you know, as a white person, and I always enjoy it as a white person when somebody white says, I want to know about white rage as a white person. It's important. Why did thousands of people storm the Capitol, storm this building? I mean, to see these two military leaders stand up in ways that, frankly, Democrats don't often stand up and say this is garbage. It was so bracing. It was so encouraging. So I hope that they lend a spine to some Democrats to just speak back because they are kind of eating our lunch on this. There's a whole school of thought that we shouldn't really dignify. We shouldn't join this argument because, you know, it is ridiculous. But it's very hard for me as a journalist to say, let's just look away. I want more people to stand up like those two military leaders did and say this is garbage.
So, Daniela, when I looked at this, and I agree with Joe in a lot of ways, I usually don't give too many of these sort of critical race theory arguments too much attention because I know it's a bad faith argument. But from an organizing standpoint, it can be effective because critical race theory is the kind of thing where the local crank at your school board suddenly becomes a political leader, right? When he or she can scream about something and go in the local school board and make noise and end up on television and end up viral, that is a recruiting technique that Republicans can use. So is this something that Democrats need to take more seriously at the state level? Do they need to be saying, look, we all know that no one's teaching critical race theory in elementary school? Or is this something that you think is going to blow over into the next fake issue that Republicans want to get absorbed with?
Well, there definitely is going to be another fake issue, so we can definitely guarantee that. But I think Joan is right that I think local leaders need to be prepared to smack it down the way those two military leaders did. You know, on other issues, just right across the border here in Loudoun County, there was like a ruckus, like people got arrested at a local school board meeting because I think it was around culture issues, quote unquote culture issues. So yes, Democrats and progressives need to be able to you can be dismissive, but you have to do so with force. You have to meet force with force, because in a vacuum, people who aren't paying attention, who don't really understand what some of these boogeyman issues are, they can be susceptible to it. So I think it is important to have a response.
Daniela Gibbs, Lejay, Howard Dean, and Joan Walsh, thank you all so much for starting off our show today.